Mr. Mercer, don't get into that car! Jonathan, it's not what you think.
What are you talking about?
The replacement driver is already confirmed.
She betrayed me. I want her arrested. Right now.
Jonathan Mercer was betrayed by his own wife. Thanks to a part-time girl working in his mansion revealing it, he only learned the truth. As a billionaire, how will he punish that wife? Let's follow the developments of the story, and don't forget to subscribe to support us.
Jonathan Mercer believed that respect was easiest to give when nobody was watching. That belief had followed him from a cramped two-bedroom apartment in Macon, Georgia, to the 43rd floor executive office overlooking downtown Atlanta. It had survived bankrupt competitors, economic crashes, hostile takeovers, and the relentless pressure that came with building Mercer Global Holdings into a company valued at over $9 billion. It also explained why, at 6:18 every morning, Jonathan still greeted every employee he passed by name. On Tuesday, September 17th, he stood beside a flower bed near the entrance of Willow Creek Estate, holding an old silver pocket watch that had once belonged to his father. The watch wasn't expensive. In fact, it barely worked anymore. The minute hand lagged behind by nearly 3 minutes. Yet Jonathan carried it every day. His father had given it to him when he launched his first trucking business with a single used vehicle and a loan nobody thought he could repay. People will remember how you treated them long after they forget how much money you made, his father had said. Jonathan never forgot. He slipped the watch back into his jacket pocket and crossed the driveway toward the garden. Luis Ramirez was already working near the southern fence line. The 58-year-old groundskeeper had been caring for the Mercer property for almost 11 years. His back wasn't as strong as it once had been, but his work remained meticulous. Every hedge was trimmed perfectly. Every flower bed looked as if it belonged in a magazine. "Morning, Luis," Jonathan called. Luis removed his gloves and smiled. "Morning, sir." Jonathan noticed the exhaustion behind the smile. He had seen it growing for months. "How's Elena doing?" The older man's expression softened immediately. "Some good days. Some difficult ones." That was Luis's way of talking about his wife without complaining. Elena Ramirez was battling kidney failure. The treatment costs were crushing. Even with insurance, medical bills arrived faster than Luis could pay them. Jonathan knew. What Jonathan didn't know was that Luis had recently started skipping meals, so his wife could afford an additional treatment session each month. The older man never mentioned it. Pride often hides behind silence. A few yards away, a young woman stepped out of the shade carrying a watering hose. "Good morning, Mr. Mercer." Jonathan turned. Sophia Ramirez, 19 years old, a nursing student working weekends to help support her grandparents while paying for classes at Atlanta Community College. Unlike most people around wealth, Sophia never seemed impressed by it. She spoke to Jonathan exactly the same way she spoke to everyone else. With honesty, Jonathan appreciated that. "How are classes?" he asked. Sophia rolled her eyes dramatically. "Anatomy is trying to destroy my life." Jonathan laughed. "So nothing has changed since my college days." For a moment, the three of them stood together beneath the Georgia morning sun. It was an ordinary scene. A billionaire, a gardener, a college student. Three people whose lives rarely appeared in the same sentence. Yet in less than 48 hours, all three would become connected by a secret buried inside the Mercer marriage. Inside the mansion, Victoria Mercer was finishing a phone call. She stood beside the kitchen window overlooking the rear gardens. From a distance, she appeared exactly as she had for years, elegant, composed, and effortlessly charming. The perfect executive spouse, the perfect partner, the perfect public image. At least that was what everyone believed, Jonathan included. When Victoria entered the dining room minutes later, she kissed him on the cheek and handed him a cup of coffee. "You're leaving for Charlotte tomorrow, right?" she asked casually. Jonathan nodded. "Early flight. 3 days. Possibly 4. Victoria smiled. A perfectly normal smile. Nothing about it seemed unusual. Nothing about it suggested betrayal. Nothing about it hinted that she had already started making arrangements for what was supposed to happen before Jonathan ever reached Charlotte. The conversation lasted less than 30 seconds. Jonathan thought nothing of it. Later, he would replay those exact words hundreds of times. Every pause, every glance, every smile, searching for the moment he should have known, searching for the warning sign he missed. Because the truth was simple. By the time people notice a bridge collapsing, the damage underneath has usually been happening for years. And somewhere behind the mansion, beyond the rose garden, and hidden from the main property by a line of old oak trees, a neglected storage shed was about to become the most important location in Jonathan Mercer's life. Neither Jonathan nor Luis knew it yet, but Sofia Ramirez would soon hear something inside, that building that would change everything. Wednesday arrived with the kind of flawless autumn weather that made Atlanta look deceptively peaceful. At 8:07 a.m., Jonathan Mercer left for Mercer Global Holdings headquarters. At 8:12 a.m., Victoria Mercer made a phone call. And at 8:14 a.m., Ethan Cross answered. The call lasted 3 minutes and 41 seconds. Neither of them knew that investigators would eventually recover every second of it. Inside the executive offices of Mercer Global Holdings, Jonathan spent the morning reviewing acquisition proposals and preparing for his upcoming trip to Charlotte. The day felt routine, predictable, safe. Meanwhile, 30 miles away, another conversation was taking place, one that would quietly move a criminal conspiracy closer to reality. Ethan Cross sat alone inside a private office leased under the name of a consulting firm he controlled. On paper, Ethan was an investment strategist. In reality, he had spent years cultivating influence around wealthy clients. He knew how to appear trustworthy. He knew how to listen. Most importantly, he knew how to identify weaknesses. Victoria Mercer had become one of those weaknesses. What began as private conversations about loneliness had gradually evolved into something far more dangerous. Something neither of them initially intended. Or at least, that was the story they would later tell investigators. The financial records suggested otherwise. For nearly 11 months, Ethan and Victoria had exchanged thousands of messages, dozens of private meetings, several unexplained money transfers, and a growing number of discussions centered around one subject: Jonathan Mercer. The problem, from their perspective, wasn't that Jonathan was cruel. He wasn't. The problem was that he was absent. Years of 12-hour workdays, years of emergency flights, years of corporate crises, years of missed anniversaries disguised as unavoidable business obligations. Victoria never stopped enjoying the lifestyle, but she slowly stopped feeling seen. Resentment rarely arrives all at once. It accumulates quietly, layer by layer, month after month, year after year. By the time resentment becomes visible, it has usually been growing for a very long time. At first, Victoria complained about Jonathan. Then she criticized him. Then she mocked him. Eventually, she began imagining life without him. That was where Ethan entered the picture. And once money became part of the conversation, morality began disappearing from it. At 3:46 p.m. that afternoon, Sofia Ramirez arrived at Willow Creek Estate to help her grandfather finish several landscaping projects before the weekend. The property stretched across nearly 17 acres. There were pathways few people used anymore, storage areas forgotten by most staff, old structures left standing simply because nobody had bothered removing them. Around 4:20 p.m., Luis asked Sofia to retrieve a roll of irrigation tubing from the old storage shed behind the southern gardens. A simple request, one that should have taken less than 2 minutes. Instead, it changed everything. Sofia followed a gravel path bordered by overgrown hedges. As she approached the shed, she noticed something unusual. A black luxury sedan sat partially hidden behind a line of trees. She didn't recognize it. That alone wasn't alarming. Visitors occasionally arrived at the estate, but something felt off. The engine was still warm. Someone had arrived recently. As Sofia reached for the shed door, she froze. Voices. 2 people were inside. The first voice belonged to Victoria Mercer. Sofia recognized it immediately. The second voice belonged to a man she had never heard before. The door wasn't completely closed, only slightly ajar. Sofia had no intention of eavesdropping. In fact, she almost walked away. Then she heard Jonathan Mercer's name. Everything changed. Instinctively, she remained still. The late afternoon breeze rustled through nearby trees. A lawn sprinkler clicked rhythmically in the distance. Somewhere across the property, a dog barked once. Then silence returned. Sophia carefully removed her phone from her pocket. She wasn't thinking about evidence. She wasn't thinking about crime. She was thinking about certainty. People mishear things. People misunderstand conversations. If something strange was happening, she wanted proof. Her thumb pressed the record button. The recording began. At first, the conversation sounded confusing. Then it became horrifying. "The replacement driver is already confirmed," the man said. Victoria's response came immediately. "He knows the regular driver takes vacation next week. He won't question it." Sophia felt her stomach tighten. Inside the shed, neither person noticed the phone recording every word. Neither person noticed the young woman standing only a few feet away. The conversation continued. Specific routes, specific dates, specific payments. Everything discussed with chilling calmness. Not like a spontaneous crime. Like a business meeting. Like a project already underway. Then came the sentence Sophia would never forget. "The insurance policy is worth $24,750,000 now," Victoria said. A brief pause followed. Then laughter. Actual laughter. Sophia felt the blood drain from her face. For several seconds, she genuinely wondered if she was misunderstanding everything. Maybe there was another explanation. Maybe they were discussing a movie. Maybe this was some bizarre hypothetical conversation. Then Ethan spoke again. "No body. No murder investigation. Just a missing husband and a grieving widow." The words landed like a hammer. No confusion remained. No alternative interpretation existed. This wasn't fantasy. This wasn't a joke. This was a plan. And according to the people inside the shed, that plan was already moving forward. Sophia remained motionless, afraid that even the sound of breathing might reveal her presence. Inside, Victoria lowered her voice. "What if he resists?" Ethan's answer came instantly. "He won't have much choice." Another pause. Then Victoria asked the question that would later destroy any possibility of claiming innocence. "How long do we keep him there?" Sophia closed her eyes. She wasn't supposed to be hearing this. Nobody was. The answer arrived a moment later. Long enough for everyone to believe he's gone. A cold wave of fear moved through her body. Jonathan Mercer wasn't just being targeted. He was being erased. And for the first time, since the recording started, Sophia realized she might be in danger too. Because if the people inside that shed discovered she had heard everything, she had no idea what they might do next. Yet the most shocking moment of the entire conversation was still coming, and it involved a detail so personal that even Jonathan Mercer himself would struggle to believe it. Sophia didn't move for nearly 30 seconds after the conversation ended. Inside the storage shed, she could hear chairs scraping across the wooden floor. The meeting was over. Panic surged through her chest. If she stayed where she was, they might open the door and find her standing there. If she ran, they might hear her. For one frozen moment, neither option felt safe. A bead of sweat rolled down the side of her face despite the cool afternoon air. The recording timer on her phone continued counting upward. 7 minutes. 22 seconds. 7 minutes. 23 seconds. Every second now felt impossibly loud. Then she heard footsteps coming toward the door. Sophia reacted instantly. She slipped behind a stack of rusted landscaping equipment leaning against the outer wall of the shed. The door opened. A shaft of sunlight cut across the ground. Victoria Mercer emerged first. Ethan Cross followed. Neither noticed her. From her hiding place, Sophia watched something that removed any remaining doubt. Victoria reached up and kissed Ethan. Not a brief gesture. Not a misunderstanding. Not something that could be explained away. A deliberate kiss between two people who believed they were alone. Sophia felt sick. She had worked around the Mercer family for years. She remembered seeing photographs of Jonathan and Victoria displayed throughout the mansion. Anniversary parties, charity galas, family vacations. The kind of images that made people believe a marriage was strong. Now she was watching that illusion collapse in real time. The two conspirators spoke quietly as they walked toward the black sedan. Sophia managed to record several more seconds before they disappeared down the gravel path. Only then did she finally breathe. For several minutes, she remained hidden, waiting, listening, making certain they were truly gone. The estate had become strangely quiet. A distant lawn mower hummed somewhere near the western boundary. Birds chirped from the oak trees overhead. Life continued normally, yet Sophia felt as if she had stepped into another reality, one where nothing was what it seemed. Slowly, she replayed the recording. The voices were unmistakable. Victoria, Ethan, the insurance policy, the replacement driver, the warehouse, the kidnapping. Every horrifying detail remained there. Permanent. Recorded. Real. Sophia's hands trembled. She wanted to call someone immediately. The police. Jonathan. Anyone. But another thought stopped her. What if she was wrong? What if there was something she didn't understand? These were powerful people. Rich people. People with lawyers. People who could destroy lives if accusations turned out to be false. The responsibility suddenly felt enormous. She wasn't a detective. She wasn't a lawyer. She was a 19-year-old nursing student trying to pay tuition. What if nobody believed her? What if she accidentally ruined innocent lives? The questions followed her all evening. At 8:47 p.m., after helping her grandfather finish work, Sophia sat alone in her small bedroom reviewing the recording again. This time she listened carefully. Very carefully. The first 6 minutes were already devastating. But near the end, another section caught her attention. A section she had barely noticed earlier. Ethan's voice. Calm. Confident. Certain. The driver replacement is already paid for. A brief silence followed. Then Victoria asked, "Has he seen Jonathan's picture?" "Several times. And he understands the route change? He'll take Mercer to the warehouse near South Fulton exactly as planned." Sophia stopped the recording. Her heart pounded. The warehouse. The driver. The route. These weren't vague discussions. These were operational details. The plan was already underway. The kidnapping wasn't a possibility. It was scheduled. And according to the timeline mentioned in the conversation, Jonathan's trip to Charlotte was only 2 days away. 2 days. 48 hours. Maybe less. For the first time, Sophia understood the real problem. The police might need time. Lawyers might need time. Investigators might need time. Jonathan Mercer didn't have time. She barely slept that night. The next morning, she considered showing the recording to her grandfather. Then decided against it. Luis already carried enough burdens. His wife was fighting for her life. Medical bills were overwhelming them. If something went wrong, Sophia didn't want him caught in the middle. So she carried the secret alone, at least for one more day. Meanwhile, across Atlanta, Jonathan Mercer was preparing for his upcoming trip, completely unaware. At 10:47 a.m. Thursday morning, he finalized travel documents. At 1:16 p.m., he approved a quarterly expansion report. At 4:03 p.m., he attended a board meeting. Throughout the entire day, he exchanged multiple messages with Victoria. Normal messages. Ordinary messages. The kind married couples send every day. Nothing appeared unusual. Nothing hinted at betrayal. Nothing warned him that his own wife was counting down the hours until he disappeared. By Thursday evening, Sophia could no longer convince herself to stay silent. The risk was too great. If the recording was authentic, and every instinct told her it was, then a man's life was in danger. A very specific man's life. At 6:42 p.m., she made her decision. She would tell Jonathan Mercer personally. Not tomorrow. Not after speaking to someone else. Tonight. Even if he thought she was crazy. Even if she lost her job. Even if nobody believed her. Because there was another cost she couldn't ignore. The cost of doing nothing. The cost of remaining silent, while an innocent person walked into a trap. And that cost felt far heavier than her fear. What Sophia didn't know was that Jonathan Mercer was about to receive proof far more painful than the recording itself. Because before the night ended, he would see something, with his own eyes, that would destroy the last reason he had to doubt her story. At 7:18 p.m. Thursday evening, Jonathan Mercer was reviewing notes for a meeting in Charlotte when his assistant informed him that someone was waiting downstairs. A young woman. No appointment. No business affiliation. No explanation beyond one sentence. She says it's about your safety. Under normal circumstances, Jonathan would have declined the meeting. Years of success attracted strange encounters. Investment pitches. Conspiracy theories. People seeking favors. but something about the message caught his attention. 5 minutes later, Sofia Ramirez stepped into a private conference room on the 43rd floor. Jonathan immediately recognized her, the granddaughter of his gardener. She looked exhausted, nervous, terrified, and yet determined. "Is everything all right?" Jonathan asked. Sofia swallowed hard. "No, sir." Those two words changed everything. For the next 20 minutes, she explained what she had heard. The storage shed, the conversation, the insurance policy, the replacement driver, the warehouse, the affair, every detail. Jonathan listened quietly. The more she spoke, the less believable the story sounded. Not because Sofia seemed dishonest. Quite the opposite. She appeared genuinely frightened. The problem was the accusation itself. Victoria? After 16 years? Impossible. Jonathan had built companies by trusting evidence. Yet this accusation collided headfirst with 16 years of memories. Birthdays, vacations, family milestones, hospital visits, business struggles, the countless moments that formed a marriage. People didn't simply erase 16 years overnight, did they? Finally, Sofia placed her phone on the table. "You don't have to believe me." Jonathan remained silent. "You just have to listen." The room became quiet. Sofia pressed play. For the first 30 seconds, Jonathan said nothing. Then his expression changed. Not dramatically, not immediately, just slightly, like someone beginning to recognize a familiar voice in a crowded room. Victoria's voice. There was no mistake. Jonathan leaned forward. The recording continued. Every sentence felt heavier than the last. The replacement driver, the insurance payout, the route diversion, the warehouse, the missing husband, the grieving widow. Jonathan's jaw tightened. Yet even then, a part of him resisted. Human beings rarely abandon comforting beliefs quickly, especially beliefs built over 16 years. When the recording ended, the room fell silent. Jonathan stared at the table. Neither person spoke. Finally, he exhaled. There has to be another explanation. The words sounded weak even to him. Sofia lowered her eyes. She had expected that response. Honestly, she would have been surprised by anything else. Then she reached into her pocket. "There is one more thing." Jonathan looked up. Sofia opened a second video. The footage was shaky, recorded from a distance, but clear enough. The screen showed the storage shed, Victoria emerging, Ethan following, and then the kiss. A long kiss. An intimate kiss. A betrayal impossible to explain away. Jonathan stopped breathing. Not literally, but for several seconds, it felt that way. The world seemed to narrow. The conference room disappeared. The city skyline vanished. Only the screen remained. Victoria, Ethan, the truth. For a moment, Jonathan felt something he had not experienced in decades. Helplessness. The video ended. Nobody spoke. The silence stretched. 10 seconds. 20. 30. Finally, Jonathan stood and walked toward the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Atlanta. The city lights shimmered below. Thousands of lives. Thousands of stories. And somehow his own had just changed forever. Behind him, Sofia waited, unsure whether she had done the right thing. Unsure whether Jonathan blamed her for delivering the truth. Eventually he spoke. His voice sounded different. Quieter. "He kissed her before?" Sofia shook her head. "No, sir." Jonathan nodded slowly. Not because the answer mattered. Because his mind was trying desperately to process reality. His marriage wasn't ending. It had already ended. He simply hadn't known it. The silver pocket watch rested inside his jacket. Instinctively, he removed it. The old metal surface reflected the conference room lights. His father's watch. The same watch he carried every day. The same watch that had accompanied him through every major decision of his life. For several seconds he stared at it, then closed it gently. A tiny click echoed through the room. Something about that sound felt final. Not dramatic. Not explosive. Final. When Jonathan finally turned back towards Sofia, his expression had changed. The shock remained. The pain remained. But something else had appeared. Focus. The same focus that had helped him survive corporate battles worth billions. The same focus that emerged whenever emotion threatened to cloud judgment. Has anyone else heard this recording? No. Your grandfather? No. Police? No. Jonathan nodded again. Good. That meant the conspirators still believed their secret was safe. and secrets were most vulnerable when their owners felt secure. At 8:31 p.m., Jonathan made a phone call. One person, one of the few people he trusted completely, Martin Caldwell. Former federal investigator, current security consultant, best friend for 23 years. Martin answered on the second ring. "What's wrong?" Jonathan almost laughed. After all these years, Martin could still hear trouble in his voice instantly. "I need your help." 25 minutes later, Martin arrived. He listened to the recording twice, watched the video 3 times, then sat back in silence. The expression on his face worried Jonathan more than anything else. Because Martin wasn't surprised. He was concerned, deeply concerned. "This isn't amateur behavior." Jonathan looked up. "What do you mean?" Martin tapped the table. "The insurance adjustment." Tap. "The replacement driver." Tap. "The warehouse location." Tap. "The planning timeline." Martin met Jonathan's eyes. These people didn't wake up yesterday and decide to commit a crime. The room grew quiet. They've been building this for months. Sophia felt a chill run through her body. Because she knew Martin was right. Everything in the recording sounded practiced, organized, prepared, not emotional, strategic. Jonathan leaned forward. "What do we do?" Martin's answer came immediately. "We don't move yet." Sophia looked surprised. Jonathan looked confused. Martin continued. "If we go to police tonight, they'll investigate. That's the point." "No." Martin shook his head. "The point is proving conspiracy beyond doubt." He paused. "Right now, we have a recording." Another pause. "A strong recording." Then another. "But we don't know how many people are involved." The realization hit Jonathan immediately. The driver, the warehouse, the money, the logistics. There had to be more. Martin nodded. "Exactly." He leaned back. "If we move too soon, someone disappears." "Victoria? Maybe. Ethan? Maybe. The driver? Definitely." The room fell silent. Martin's eyes hardened. "We need the whole network." Outside the window, darkness settled across Atlanta. Inside the conference room, a new plan was beginning to form. Not a plan for revenge, a plan for exposure. Because somewhere out there, people still believed Jonathan Mercer was walking blindly toward their trap. And for now, Martin intended to let them keep believing it. Neither conspirator had any idea that their intended victim was already watching them. And over the next 48 hours, every phone call, every payment, and every move they made would bring them one step closer to destroying themselves. For the next 48 hours, Jonathan Mercer lived 2 separate lives. In one version, he was exactly what Victoria expected. A busy CEO preparing for a business trip. Predictable, distracted, completely unaware. In the other version, every move around him was being quietly documented. Every phone call, every financial transaction, every suspicious contact. Martin Caldwell assembled a small team of investigators he trusted from his years in federal law enforcement. Nobody outside the group knew what was happening. Not Victoria, not Ethan, not the man hired to replace Jonathan's regular driver. And that secrecy became their greatest advantage. By Friday afternoon, the first major breakthrough arrived. A payment trail. One of Martin's investigators discovered a transfer of $187,430 from an account secretly controlled by Victoria Mercer to a consulting company linked to Ethan Cross. The transaction had been split into 7 smaller payments over 3 months. An obvious attempt to avoid attention. It failed. A second discovery followed. The insurance policy. 3 months earlier, Victoria had insisted on increasing Jonathan's life and disappearance coverage from $12 million to $24. $75 million. The justification cited asset protection concerns. The insurance company approved the change. Nobody questioned it. At the time. Now it looked very different. By Friday evening, investigators had also identified the replacement driver. His real name was Travis Boone. 42 years old. A history of gambling debts. Multiple financial judgments. Recent cash deposits totaling $63,800. The timing wasn't subtle. Neither was the source. The money trail pointed directly toward Ethan Cross. The conspiracy was growing larger by the hour. Yet Martin still refused to move. Not because evidence was lacking. Because the final piece was still missing. Intent and action. the actual attempt. Without it, defense attorneys would spend years arguing alternative explanations. Martin wanted certainty, the kind juries couldn't ignore, the kind that destroyed reasonable doubt. Saturday morning arrived, the day of Jonathan's scheduled trip to Charlotte. At 7:03 a.m., Victoria kissed her husband goodbye. The gesture appeared affectionate, natural, almost convincing. Jonathan looked into her eyes, searching, not for guilt, not for fear, for anything familiar. Anything remaining from the woman he had married 16 years earlier. He found nothing, only performance. For the first time in his life, Jonathan understood how dangerous appearances could be. At 7:41 a.m., he climbed into the waiting SUV. The replacement driver sat behind the wheel. Exactly as predicted, Martin's surveillance team immediately activated. Unmarked vehicles positioned themselves along the route. Federal-grade tracking equipment monitored movement in real time. 2 undercover officers joined the operation through coordination with local authorities. Nobody intended to lose sight of the vehicle. The SUV left Willow Creek Estate. For 23 minutes, everything followed the expected route toward the airport. Then it happened. The turn. One unexpected turn. The vehicle exited the highway, not toward Hartsfield-Jackson Airport. South, toward South Fulton. Jonathan sat quietly in the rear seat. His pulse accelerated, even though he knew the plan, even though police were watching, even though Martin had prepared for this moment. Reality felt different when it actually happened. The driver checked his mirror. Once, twice, then spoke. "There's some traffic ahead, Mr. Mercer. Taking a faster route." Jonathan nodded calmly. The lie sounded rehearsed. Because it was. The SUV continued south. Industrial buildings replaced office towers. Traffic thinned. Roads became increasingly isolated. The city gradually disappeared behind them. 22 minutes later, the vehicle entered an abandoned warehouse district. Rows of neglected structures stretched across the landscape. Broken windows, rusting fences, empty parking lots. Exactly the type of place described in the recording. Jonathan looked out the window. The warehouse existed. The route existed. The conspiracy existed. Every remaining doubt vanished. Then came the moment everything changed. The SUV slowed near a large corrugated metal building. The driver reached toward a communication device hidden beside his seat. A signal, a notification, the final step. Before he could complete it, flashing blue lights erupted from every direction. Instantly, violently, overwhelmingly, police vehicles surged into the area. Unmarked units blocked every exit. Tires screeched. Doors slammed. Commands echoed across the empty industrial park. "Police, turn off the vehicle. Hands where we can see them. Do not move." The driver froze. For several seconds he appeared unable to process what was happening. Then panic took over. His hands began shaking. The realization hit him all at once. The operation had failed. Completely. Within moments, officers removed him from the vehicle. Jonathan exited separately under police protection. The morning air felt strangely cold. Across the parking lot, Martin approached. Neither man spoke immediately. They didn't need to. The evidence had finally crossed the line, from conspiracy into execution. Exactly what Martin wanted. Exactly what prosecutors needed. And exactly what Victoria Mercer never expected. The driver lasted less than 3 hours during questioning. 3 hours. That was all. Years of planning. Months of preparation. Millions of dollars at stake. Destroyed in less time than a football game. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Travis Boone confessed. Everything. The payments. The route. The instructions. The warehouse. The agreement to hold Jonathan for several days, while the disappearance narrative developed. Every detail matched the recording Sophia had captured. Every detail strengthened the case. By 4:17 p.m. Saturday afternoon, arrest warrants were issued. At 5:03 p.m., officers entered Ethan Cross's condominium in Buckhead. At 5:41 p.m., they executed a search warrant on his office. Computers, phones, financial records, encrypted messages. Investigators seized everything. At 6:26 p.m., Victoria Mercer was arrested at Willow Creek Estate. Witnesses later described the scene as surreal. The elegant socialite, who had spent years attending charity galas and business events, stood on her own front steps as officers informed her of the charges. conspiracy to commit kidnapping, insurance fraud, criminal solicitation, multiple related offenses. Even then, she refused to accept reality. Even then, she insisted she was the victim. The victim of misunderstanding. The victim of manipulation. The victim of circumstances. The pattern Martin had predicted unfolded perfectly. Shock. Denial. Deflection. Not once did she ask whether Jonathan was safe. Not once. 3 days later, Jonathan faced Victoria across an interrogation room table. For several moments, neither spoke. The silence felt heavier than anger, heavier than shouting, heavier than betrayal. Finally, Victoria lowered her eyes. Not from shame, from exhaustion. What do you want me to say? Jonathan stared at her. The woman sitting across from him looked familiar, yet somehow completely unknown. After a long pause, she answered the question herself. It didn't start because of the money. Jonathan said nothing. It started because I felt invisible. Another pause. Then I became angry. Her voice weakened. Then I stopped caring. Finally, tears appeared. Not dramatic tears. Not theatrical tears. The kind that arrive when someone realizes they crossed a line they can never uncross. And eventually, she whispered, I became someone I don't even recognize. For the first time, since hearing the recording, Jonathan felt something unexpected. Not forgiveness. Not sympathy. Sadness. Profound sadness. Because no matter what crimes had been committed, the marriage had not collapsed in a single day. The collapse had happened slowly, quietly, over years, in conversations never held, warnings ignored, distance accepted as normal. Greed finished the destruction. But loneliness had opened the door. As Jonathan stood to leave, his hand brushed against the silver pocket watch in his jacket. The same watch his father had given him decades earlier. The same watch that had accompanied him through triumph and disaster alike. He held it for a moment, then placed it back into his pocket. Some things survive betrayal. Trust was not one of them. But the story wasn't over. The personal consequences had only begun. Within weeks, the organizational fallout would shake Mercer Global Holdings. And within months, changes set in motion by one courageous young woman would spread far beyond a single family, a single crime, or a single arrest. The arrests made headlines across Georgia within days. What began as a private criminal investigation quickly became a national story. Not because Jonathan Mercer was a billionaire. Not because the insurance policy was worth $24.75 million. But because the entire conspiracy had been stopped by a 19-year-old nursing student who simply refused to ignore what she heard. The consequences unfolded in waves. The first wave hit immediately. Ethan Cross was terminated from every advisory position he held. His professional licenses were suspended pending review. Several clients withdrew more than $312 million in managed assets within 18 days of the arrest. Victoria Mercer remained in custody while prosecutors prepared formal charges. The evidence against her continued growing as forensic analysts recovered deleted messages, financial records, and communications dating back nearly 11 months. Neither defendant accepted responsibility publicly. Neither expressed remorse in any meaningful way. Both focused almost entirely on defending themselves, exactly as Martin had predicted. But the second wave proved even more damaging. Within 3 weeks, Mercer Global Holdings launched a comprehensive internal review of executive security procedures. The audit cost $4.8 million. Investigators discovered multiple weaknesses that had existed for years. Driver verification systems, travel authorization protocols, executive protection standards, background screening procedures. The company implemented 27 new security requirements across all North American operations. Board members unanimously approved what became known internally as the Mercer Protection Framework. Employees simply called it the Sophia Rule. One principle sat at the top of every training document. If something feels wrong, speak up. No exceptions. No hierarchy. No fear of consequences. The third wave arrived months later, and its impact extended far beyond Mercer Global Holdings. Insurance companies across several states began reviewing large disappearance benefit policies. Corporate security organizations cited the Mercer case in conferences and training seminars. Several universities used the incident as a case study on ethics, organizational blind spots, and whistleblower courage. A single decision made by a 19-year-old student had created effects reaching thousands of people she would never meet. Yet none of those outcomes mattered most to Jonathan Mercer. Something else did. 6 months after the arrests, he stood on a stage inside a newly renovated educational center in Atlanta. More than 200 guests filled the auditorium. Students, teachers, community leaders, healthcare workers, families, journalists. The banner behind him displayed 4 simple words: the Sophia Courage Foundation. Jonathan looked toward the front row. Sophia sat beside her grandfather. Luis wore his best suit, the same suit he had purchased for a cousin's wedding nearly a decade earlier. His eyes glistened with pride, not because of the cameras, not because of the attention, because his granddaughter had changed lives while simply doing what was right. The foundation's mission was straightforward: provide scholarships for young adults who demonstrate extraordinary integrity, honesty, and moral courage. Not academic excellence, not athletic achievement, character. In its first year, the foundation funded 37 scholarships, totaling $917,000. Sophia became the first recipient. She graduated debt-free. A year later, she entered one of Georgia's most respected nursing programs. Jonathan never referred to her as his hero. Sophia disliked that description. Instead, he called her something else: the person who paid attention, because that was the truth. She noticed what everyone else overlooked, including him, especially him. 1 year after the arrests, Jonathan made another decision. He stepped away from daily executive operations. Not completely, but enough to reclaim parts of life he had neglected. He spent more time with family, more time with friends, more time listening. For decades, he had believed providing for loved ones was the highest form of care. The experience taught him something different. Presence matters too, sometimes more. The lessons arrived painfully, but they arrived, and Jonathan intended to honor them. 2 years later, on a quiet Saturday morning, Jonathan visited Willow Creek Estate. The property looked different now, healthier, lighter somehow. Near the southern gardens, workers had removed the old storage shed where the conspiracy first came to light. In its place stood a small memorial garden. Nothing elaborate, just a stone pathway, a few benches, and flowering plants selected by Sophia herself. Jonathan walked slowly through the garden. The silver pocket watch rested in his hand. Its surface showed new scratches. Its mechanism still ran 3 minutes slow. Some things never changed. He stopped beside a plaque mounted near a white oak tree. The inscription contained only a single sentence: "Courage begins when someone chooses not to look away." For a moment, Jonathan stood silently, thinking about betrayal, thinking about forgiveness, thinking about second chances. Most of all, thinking about attention. The small moments people dismiss, the quiet warnings people ignore, the ordinary decisions that eventually shape entire lives. From across the garden, laughter drifted through the morning air. Sophia and Luis were planting new flowers near the pathway. The old groundskeeper moved more slowly now, but he was smiling. A genuine smile, one free from fear, one free from uncertainty. Sophia waved. Jonathan waved back. Then he slipped the silver pocket watch into his jacket pocket and started walking toward them. Sunlight filtered through the oak branches above. Fresh flowers swayed gently in the Georgia breeze. And beside the pathway, where an abandoned storage shed once stood, 3 people knelt in the soil together, planting something that would continue growing long after all of them were gone.